A black nanny for the Winston children? Get this dog out of my house.
I'm not leaving until I see Mr. Winston.
12 professionals failed those kids, and now a stray from the ghetto thinks she can do better?
I didn't come to fix them. I came to listen.
Diane's heels clicked across the marble until her perfume hit Maya's face.
The only thing your kind listens to is a welfare check hitting the mole box.
Maya didn't blink. At the top of the stairs, Garrett Winston gripped the railing. His triplets hadn't spoken since their mother died. 11 months of silence, 12 failures. He looked at Maya, the 13th, and thought,
let her try.
Sir, you can't be serious.
I said let her try.
3 months later, he wished he'd opened that door sooner. The Winston estate sat on 11 acres of manicured silence. 3 marble fountains lined the front drive. Not one of them ran. The gardeners had turned them off months ago because Garrett Winston couldn't stand the sound of flowing water. It reminded him of Claire humming in the kitchen while she cooked Saturday pancakes. Everything reminded him of Claire. The smell of jasmine from the east garden, the creak of the 3rd step on the staircase, the one she'd always skip with a little hop, the lavender hand soap in every bathroom. He'd thrown out all the soap. The jasmine kept blooming on its own. Inside, the house stretched wide and breathless. 26 rooms, marble floors so polished they reflected your grief right back at you. A chef who cooked meals and left them on trays outside 3-bedroom doors. And 3 19-year-olds who hadn't spoken a single word in 11 months. Garrett sat behind his mahogany desk, a glass of bourbon warming between his palms. The ice had melted 20 minutes ago. He hadn't noticed. 12 personnel files lay fanned across the surface, every one stamped in red. Terminated. 12 caretakers in 11 months. Some lasted weeks. One lasted 6 days. The most expensive, a Harvard psychologist at $4,000 a day, lasted 9. None of them could make Lily, Noah, or Emma Winston speak. It started the night of the accident. November 14th. Claire was driving home from Emma's campus. Homemade soup because Emma had the flu. Butternut squash, Claire's specialty. A delivery truck ran a red light on Route 9. The impact crumpled the driver's side like aluminum foil. The paramedics said she never felt it. Garrett didn't believe them. The news covered it for a week. Cameras outside the gates. Flowers from strangers piling up against the iron fence until the groundskeeper filled 3 dumpsters. Condolence cards by the hundreds. From senators, from CEOs, from a 4th grade class in Ohio who made paper hearts because their teacher told them a nice lady had died. At the funeral, Lily wore sunglasses indoors, her fingernails bitten raw beneath her coat sleeves. She stood at the casket longer than anyone else, her fingers hovering over the polished oak like she wanted to knock on it. Noah stood like concrete, jaw locked so tight a muscle twitched below his ear. He didn't cry, not once. His eyes stayed fixed on a point somewhere behind the altar, as if looking directly at the coffin would make the whole thing real in a way he wasn't ready for. Emma held a letter she'd written to her mother and never let go. Her knuckles turned white around the edges. When the pastor asked if anyone wanted to say a few words, all 3 of them looked at the floor. After the funeral, the silence began. The triplets withdrew from university. Lily stopped painting, brushes hardening in open turpentine jars that filled the hallway with a sharp chemical smell. Noah shoved his guitar under the bed. Emma deleted her blog. 4 years of writing, gone in one click. They moved like ghosts, eating alone, closing doors softly as if even a latch was too much language. Dr. Leonard Shaw diagnosed selective mutism, compounded by complicated grief. He recommended clinical intervention. The triplets sat through sessions like wax figures. Shaw would ask a question. Silence. A different angle. Silence. The clock ticked loud enough to fill the room by itself. After 6 months, Shaw told Garrett, "When 3 people share the same silence, they validate each other's withdrawal. It becomes a closed system. You should prepare yourself." Garrett fired the 8th caretaker that afternoon. The 9th was a grief ministry nun. 2 weeks. The 10th, a Geneva psychologist who smelled like peppermint. 11 days. The 11th tried art therapy. Noah threw water at his feet on day 3. Not in anger, in absolute calm. Poured it out, set the glass down, walked away like he was watering a plant. The 12th lasted 4 days. On the 5th morning, she packed her bag, set her keycard on the kitchen counter, and drove away before sunrise. Told the agency, "That house needs an exorcist. Those kids don't want help. They want their mother back, and there's no invoice code for resurrection." Garrett called again. "Send me someone else. We're running out of candidates willing to—" "I don't care about willing. I care about capable. My children had voices. Find me someone who can give that back." The coordinator hesitated. "There's one file, flagged, terminated from St. Andrew's Hospital. Unorthodox methods, music, storytelling, play-based approaches with adult patients. They called it reckless." "What's her name?" "Maya Holloway." Garrett stared at the 12 red stamps bleeding across his desk. 12 failures by the book, line by line. Maybe what his children needed wasn't in any book ever written. Send her. Maya Holloway arrived with one suitcase and a cardboard box. The suitcase held 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and a framed photograph of her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in Trenton, New Jersey. The box held colored pencils, modeling clay, a ukulele with a cracked neck she'd glued back together, hand puppets, picture books, and a Bluetooth speaker loaded with 200 songs she'd curated over 6 years of working with patients who wouldn't talk. Diane met her at the service entrance. Not the front door. The side door next to the trash bins. "Staff enters here," Diane said, cataloging Maya's shoes, her coat, the cardboard box held together with packing tape. "Your room is 3rd floor, smallest bedroom, shares a wall with the laundry machines. I trust that won't be a problem for someone from your background." "It won't. Breakfast at 6. You eat in the kitchen, not the dining room. The dining room is for the family." She paused. "Whatever's left of it." Maya followed through a narrow service hallway, cleaning carts, bleach, and industrial soap, then through a swinging door into the main house. Vaulted ceilings, a chandelier the size of a compact car, marble floors reflecting light in long, cold streaks. But underneath the lemon cleaner, something stale, like air that hadn't moved in months. Like grief had settled into the walls and no one had thought to open a window. Garrett Winston was waiting in the sitting room. Backlit by the window, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. He looked like a man who'd once commanded rooms full of powerful people and was now just tired. The kind of tired sleep doesn't fix. "Dr. Shaw, our family therapist, has formally advised against hiring you. Says your methods have no clinical foundation. That bringing you here is an act of desperation that borders on negligence." "And what do you think?" He almost smiled. Almost. "I think I've spent $400,000 on negligence that came with diplomas. So let's try the other kind." He turned to the window. "Diane will show you the rules. Follow them or don't. I don't care anymore. Just—" His voice cracked, a hairline fracture in concrete. "Just get them to talk to me again." Maya nodded. She didn't promise. She'd learned a long time ago not to promise families the one thing they wanted most. On the 2nd floor landing, Maya stopped. The West Wing hallway stretched ahead. 3 doors, all closed. Lily's had a faint smudge of blue paint near the handle. Noah's had a small dent at the base, the kind a foot makes kicking something shut too many times. Emma's was the only one with the deadbolt engaged, locked from inside. The hallway was silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has weight. 3 19-year-olds lived behind those doors, ate behind them, slept behind them, grieved behind them. The doors might as well have been coffin lids. "Don't stand there," Diane said sharply. "You're not authorized on this floor unsupervised." Diane's briefing continued without warmth. Trays at 7, 12, and 6. Lily took hers in 10 minutes. Noah waited until the hallway emptied. Emma sometimes didn't eat at all. When was the last time anyone heard them speak? November 15th, The morning after the funeral, Emma said one word to the housekeeper: "Don't." 11 months ago. Since then, nothing. Not a whisper, not even crying. She detailed the failures. The last caretaker lasted 3 days. Noah threw water at his feet. Didn't look at him, just poured it out and walked away, like he was watering a plant. The one before that tried music outside Lily's door. She shoved a towel under the gap so tight they had to remove the frame. The one before that left notes under Emma's door. Emma collected them in a neat pile, carried them to the hallway, and set them on fire with a kitchen lighter. No expression, no anger, just lit a match and watched them burn. These weren't random acts. Maya recognized them immediately. The water, the towel, the fire. Each one a message. Clear, precise, deliberate. The triplets weren't broken. They were communicating in the only language they had left. Every caretaker before her had tried to make them speak. Not one had tried to understand what they were already saying. In her narrow room, washing machines vibrating through the wall, Maya unpacked the ukulele first. Ran her thumb across the strings. A soft, imperfect chord hummed through the small room. She placed it on the windowsill where it would catch the morning light. Then she lined up pencils on the nightstand, opened the clay, set books in a row against the baseboard. She wasn't decorating. She was building a vocabulary. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and listened. The machines hummed. The pipes ticked inside the walls. A floorboard creaked 2 stories below. And from the second floor, so faint it could have been the house itself exhaling, something that sounded almost like a voice. Maya didn't move. She closed her eyes and listened harder. Maya's first full day, she did nothing. Sat in the second-floor hallway with her back against the wall, opened a novel, and read. Didn't knock, didn't speak. Just existed in their space without demanding anything from it. At 9:15, a floorboard creaked behind Lily's door. Someone standing close. Listening, maybe. At 11, Maya went downstairs for water. When she came back, her book had been moved from page 43 to 44. Someone had turned the page. She sat back down and kept reading from 44. Day 2. Same routine. She brought the ukulele but didn't play it. Hummed 3 notes of her grandmother's lullaby. Barely audible, just a rise and fall that sounded like breathing. Behind Lily's door, the creak moved closer to the door. Longer this time. Day 3. She left a garden sketch outside Lily's door. Nothing elaborate, just a row of sunflowers she'd drawn from memory, the kind her grandmother grew in coffee cans on the fire escape. When she returned an hour later, the sunflowers were gone. In their place, a pencil drawing on the back of a cereal box. A woman in a hallway, reading, 1 foot tucked under the opposite knee. Flawless proportions. Precise shading. Soft where light hit the wall, heavy where shadow pooled beneath the bent knee. The woman's face had no features. Not because Lily couldn't draw them, because she hadn't decided yet whether Maya deserved a face. Someone had been watching through a crack in the door. Maya drew a response. Same woman, now with a bird on her book. Slid it under the door. She sat back down, heart hammering, and waited. Next morning, the bird had flown to the woman's shoulder. And in the corner, so small you'd miss it if you weren't looking for it, a second figure standing in a doorway. Hair down, barefoot, one hand resting on the doorframe like she was deciding whether to step through. Lily had drawn herself, and the faceless woman now had eyes. Day 4. Guitar tablature outside Noah's door. Blackbird. She'd heard him playing after midnight. Amp unplugged, fingers pressing strings in the dark. Notes so soft they barely carried through wood. By evening, the melody came halting through his door. A wrong note, a pause, then smoother. The same 4 bars, repeated, refined, repeated again. She sat outside for 40 minutes. When he stopped, she whispered, barely above her own breathing, "That was beautiful." A single G major chord answered. Soft, open, warm. Like a thank you that couldn't find words to wear. Day 5. Emma, the hardest. The writer who'd burned notes and deleted 4 years of words. Maya understood what no clinical assessment had captured. Emma hadn't stopped because she'd lost the ability. Language itself was the wound. Words were what she'd shared with Claire. Stories, texts, the blog they'd co-edited. Sentences were her mother's fingerprints, and every one Emma tried to write came back covered in grief. Maya left a blank notebook. No title, no instructions, no "write when you're ready." 70 empty pages, 2 days untouched. Third morning, gone. In its place, a page folded twice. Maya unfolded it with trembling fingers. One sentence, pressed so hard the letters left grooves on the other side. She used to fold my letters into cranes. Maya read it 7 times, then wrote, "What kind of paper did she use?" and folded it into a crane, left it at noon. Next morning, yellow, always yellow. She walked 2 miles to the craft store, bought every sheet of yellow paper they had, folded 6 cranes, each holding a question. What was her favorite song? Coffee or tea? What made her laugh the hardest? What did her hands smell like? What's the last thing she said to you? By week's end, 11 cranes on her nightstand. Claire's favorite song was "Here Comes the Sun." She drank chamomile tea, laughed hardest at her own jokes, sang off-key and didn't care. Her hands smelled like vanilla lotion from a drugstore brand she'd used since college. And the last thing she said to Emma was, "Save me some soup. I'll be home in 20 minutes." She never came home. The pattern was clear. Lily communicated through images, Noah through sound, Emma through writing, but only when the format honored her mother's memory. They hadn't gone mute because they were damaged. They'd built a private world, a language of drawings and melodies and folded yellow paper, because the public world had stolen the one person who spoke their language fluently. But it was night 9 that shattered everything she thought she understood. 2:14 a.m., light under Emma's door. Then, a sound. So faint Maya stopped breathing. A voice. Then another. Then a third. The triplets were together, whispering, taking turns rebuilding a memory. A beach in Cape Cod. Lily described the sand at sunset, the salt tasting on their lips. Noah added the surf, the gulls, their mother's laugh when cold water hit her ankles. Emma narrated the center, what Claire wore, what she said, how she held all 3 hands as they walked the shoreline with the tide pulling at their feet. They were reconstructing a memory, in whispers, in the dark, as if speaking at full volume would fracture the spell and force them to admit the memory was all they had left. They were talking to their mother, and at 2 a.m., she was still alive. Maya pressed her hand over her mouth. Tears ran down her cheeks, pooled along her jaw. She understood now. The silence wasn't a symptom, it was a sanctuary. They'd stopped talking to the world because they'd found something more important. A ritual so fragile it could only survive in whispers. And they believed that if they spoke at full volume, if they let the outside world flood in, Claire would become past tense. A photograph on a mantel. A name carved into stone, gone in a way whispering wouldn't allow. She sat until the voices faded, until the light went dark. Didn't tell Garrett. Not yet. She went to her room and started planning. Now she knew the language, and she was going to learn to speak it. On day 13, Maya asked Garrett for the living room. Quiet activities, drawing, clay, music, just a space without a door between us. Dr. Shaw found out within the hour. He didn't call. He drove to the estate. Maya heard his shoes crossing the marble foyer with the quick, hard steps of a man who'd been overruled and wanted everyone to know it. He found Garrett in the study. Maya heard every word through the wall. She has no plan, no treatment timeline, no measurable outcomes. She's asking your children to sit on the floor and play with clay. This isn't therapy, this is finger painting dressed up as intervention. Maybe finger painting is what they need. What they need is evidence-based treatment. What this woman is doing is reinforcing avoidance behavior. Every day they spend in comfortable silence is another day those pathways harden. She's not healing them. She's making them more comfortable being broken. My children set notes on fire, threw water at a man's feet like he was a stain on the carpet. Haven't sat at the same table as me since their mother died. Your frameworks aren't working, Leonard. Not even close. So your solution is a 26-year-old with a box of crayons who was fired from the only hospital that ever hired her. Garrett's voice went flat. Dangerous. The voice that had ended careers across 3 continents. My solution is the only person in 12 months who's gotten Lily to draw again, who's gotten Noah to pick up his guitar, who's gotten Emma to write a single sentence. Your solution put my children deeper into their rooms. So yes, the woman with the crayons. And if you have a problem with that, Leonard, I know where the door is. Shaw left without another word. His car pulled out fast enough to scatter gravel. Maya set up the living room, pushed furniture to the walls, spread a canvas drop cloth across the marble. Pencils, pastels, clay in 7 colors, the ukulele, yellow paper for cranes, soft music through the speaker, just loud enough to give the silence a shape. Day 1, nobody came. Maya drew for 3 hours alone. Day 2, Lily appeared in the doorway, pajamas, hair unwashed, sketchbook clutched like a shield. She stood for a full minute. Maya didn't look up. Lily sat down 8 feet away and drew. They worked together for 2 hours without a word. When Lily left, she'd placed a single pastel crayon halfway between them. Cobalt blue. A bridge. Maya used it to finish the sky in her drawing. Day 3. Noah joined. Guitar dangling from one hand, sat in the corner. After 20 minutes, his thumb brushed the strings and found Maya's humming, weaving around it like a vine around a trellis. Lily's pencil moved faster when the music started. Her lines grew looser, braver. Something in the room shifted. Not dramatic, more like a window opening 1 inch in a house sealed for a year. Day 4. Diane folded the drop cloth, moved supplies, left a note. Keep personal items in your room. D.P. Maya carried everything back without a word. Day 5. All 3. Emma arrived last, carrying nothing. She stood in the doorway so long Maya thought she'd leave. She didn't. She sat against the far wall, pulled her knees to her chest, and watched. 4 people in a room. No one speaking. Lily drawing. Noah playing. Emma watching. Maya holding the space together with nothing but presence and the quiet belief that being together was enough. At noon, Maya placed Claire's photo album in the center of the drop cloth. She'd asked Garrett's permission the night before. He'd gone pale but handed it over. Cape Cod, Claire in a sundress, laughing, arms around all 3 of them, sand on their feet, sun tangled in their hair. The kind of photograph that hurts because everyone in it believed they had forever. The room changed. You could feel it the way you feel thunder coming, that drop in pressure, that electric stillness. Emma moved first, crawled forward on her hands and knees, slowly, like approaching something that might vanish if she breathed too hard. She touched Claire's face with 1 finger. Her hand shook so badly the album trembled on the floor. Lily set down her pencils, took Emma's hand. Noah crossed the room and placed both hands on his sister's shoulders. They knelt around that album like a fire they hadn't been warm beside in 11 months. Emma turned a page. Claire in the kitchen, flour on her nose, laughing at something out of frame. Emma made a sound. Not a word, not a cry, something between a breath and a collapse. The sound grief makes when it finds a crack in the wall you built around it. Noah's jaw locked. Tears ran down his face. Lily pressed her forehead against Emma's shoulder. Maya spoke. For the first time in that room, she used her voice. Whisper volume, the same frequency the Triplets used at 2 a.m. She'd be so proud of you 3. 5 seconds. 10. The clock on the mantel ticked like a heartbeat. Then Noah, his voice like gravel dragged across asphalt, like a rusted hinge forced open after a year of rain, whispered back, "You think so?" 2 words. 2 words that cracked 11 months of silence like a stone through cathedral glass. The first words any of them had spoken to an outsider since November 15th. Since don't. Since their mother got in the car and promised to be home in 20 minutes and never came back. Maya's vision blurred. She held herself together with everything she had. "I know so." From the hallway, Diane watched through the crack in the door. Her expression showed nothing warm, nothing relieved. The look of a woman watching her own power disappear and already deciding what to do about it. That evening, Garrett sat alone in his study, rewinding the living room security footage. The same 30 seconds 4 times. Noah's whisper. "You think so?" He pressed his palm flat against the screen, covering his son's face. His fingers were trembling. For the first time in 11 months, he didn't want an expert's opinion. He wanted to believe. He was right. But what came next would nearly destroy it. Diane Prescott had worked for the Winston family for 14 years. She'd started as a part-time housekeeper, hired by Claire herself. She'd watched the money come, slowly at first, then in a flood. The rented apartment became a townhouse. The townhouse became the estate. And Diane rose with it. Housekeeper to head of household staff, the woman who managed the schedules, the vendors, the meals, the cameras, every moving part that kept the Winston machine running. When Claire died, Diane became the spine. She prepared the trays, coordinated with Dr. Shaw, briefed each caretaker and debriefed each one when they left. She held the keys. She managed the cameras. Every locked door answered to her. 12 caretakers came and went. 12 times Diane maintained control. If the triplets never spoke, if the house stayed sealed and silent and running on her schedule, she stayed indispensable. That was something she understood. Maya Holloway was something she didn't understand. And what Diane couldn't understand, she couldn't control. And what she couldn't control, she destroyed. It started small. Supplies rearranged. Breakfast shifted cold. Laundry machines running all night behind Maya's wall. Drip by drip. After Noah's whisper, petty became strategic. She called Shaw. "Miss Holloway brought out Mrs. Winston's photo album without consulting you. Unsupervised time with them. Unvetted materials." Shaw drafted a 3-page memo recommending Maya's suspension. Garrett read it. Didn't act. Didn't throw it away. The seed was planted. Then the staff. Surgical questions at the right moments. "Has anyone noticed how much time she spends on the second floor after dark? I found her outside Emma's room at 2 a.m. Don't you think that's unusual?" I'm not saying anything is wrong. I'm just saying, how would we know? Within days, the kitchen staff stopped making eye contact. The young maid who used to eat breakfast with Maya, the only person in the house who asked about her grandmother, who laughed at her stories about the laundromat, started eating in the pantry. When Maya walked into the kitchen, conversations died like someone had pulled a plug. The chef who'd once left extra soup with a handwritten note now placed Maya's tray at the far end of the counter without a word, without eye contact, like she was radioactive. Maya felt it everywhere. The way rooms emptied when she entered. The way whispers trailed her down hallways. She recognized this too. She'd grown up black in spaces that weren't built for her. She knew what it felt like when the air in a room rearranged itself around your presence, when people who smiled yesterday suddenly found the floor very interesting. She'd survived it before. She'd survive it again. But surviving it while trying to save 3 kids who were just learning to trust her, that was a different kind of weight. Then came the camera. Diane managed the household security system. She knew every angle, every blind spot, every timestamp. The estate ran 46 cameras. The children's hallway had 2, mounted at each end, recording 24 hours a day. Night 22. Maya sat in the second-floor hallway at 1:50 a.m. She did this most nights now, sat outside Emma's door, eyes closed, notebook in her lap, listening to the whispered ritual, learning the language. She never entered, never knocked, never touched the handle. Diane pulled the footage from camera 7. She edited it. Not with visible cuts, nothing that clumsy. She extracted a 90-second segment, Maya walking toward Emma's door at 1:52. Maya standing close. Maya's hand near the handle. What she removed was everything else. The 20 minutes of sitting, the closed eyes, the notebook, the stillness. She cut the context like a surgeon removes healthy tissue to expose a wound that wasn't there. Without the context, the clip told a different story. A woman approaching a 19-year-old's bedroom door in the dark. reaching for the handle, alone. Diane brought the footage to Garrett at 8 the next morning, placed her laptop on his desk. I debated whether to show you this, but I have a duty to this family. Garrett watched the 90 seconds. His face went from confusion to concern to something colder in under half a minute. He watched it again. In the edited version, Maya's posture looked deliberate, purposeful. The hand near the handle looked like intent, not proximity. The clip was a weapon, and Diane had built it to fire. "I'm not making accusations," Diane said, and the way she said it was the accusation itself. But she was terminated for boundary violations. She has no supervision here, and she's outside their bedrooms at 2 in the morning. I just think you should consider what that looks like. Garrett's hand closed around the empty bourbon glass, knuckles white. He called Maya to his office at 9:15. She walked in and knew immediately. His posture, his eyes, the distance he'd created. "I saw the footage. You were outside Emma's room at 2 a.m. I was in the hallway, sitting, listening. The footage shows you at her door, hand on the handle. That's not what happened. I have video, Miss Holloway." "Ask your children," she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. "They know I sit in the hallway. They hear me every night. I have never opened that door." "My children don't speak." The words hit like a closed fist. Because he believed it. After everything, after the cranes, the drawings, the music, after, "You think so?" He still believed his children were silent. "They do," Maya said quietly. "You just haven't heard them yet." Garrett stood. "Pack your things. I want you out by noon." Maya looked at him. She wanted to fight. She wanted to pull the full, unedited footage and show him the 20 minutes Diane had carved out. She wanted to explain the ritual, the whispering, the cranes, the yellow paper, the 3 19-year-olds slowly clawing their way back to language one syllable at a time. But she recognized the look on his face. She'd seen it at St. Andrews when the board voted to terminate her. The look of a decision that had already hardened, a door already sealed. "Fine," she said, "but when you watch the full footage, every minute, uncut, I hope you'll call me." She walked out of his office. Down the hallway, her footsteps echoed across the marble. The same marble Diane's heels had clicked across the day she called her a dog. At the bottom of the staircase, she stopped. Because at the top, standing side by side for the first time in 11 months, were Lily, Noah, and Emma. They'd heard everything. Lily's eyes burned red. Noah's fists were white, jaw-grinding glass. And Emma held a notebook. Not Maya's. A different one. Older. Thicker. Filled cover to cover. The notebook she'd been writing in all along. Maya's hand was on the brass latch when a voice came from the staircase. Not a whisper. A voice. "Stop!" Emma Winston. Notebook in both hands like a shield-turned weapon. Flanked by her brother and sister. Jaw set with a ferocity that had no business belonging to someone who hadn't spoken in 11 months. Garrett froze at the end of the hallway. He hadn't seen his 3 children in the same place since the funeral. Emma opened the notebook and read. Her voice was raw. A year of silence had stripped it to the bare filament of sound. But it held. November 15th. I said don't to the housekeeper. It was my last word for 11 months. I didn't plan to stop. Like my voice decided the world didn't deserve it anymore. Like speaking meant admitting she was really gone. She turned a page. They called it selective mutism. Treatment resistant. A lot of words to describe the fact that we didn't have any. Then Maya came. She sat in the hallway and read a book. First time since Mom died that someone existed near us without needing something from us. Lily stepped forward, whisper volume, hands shaking. She drew pictures under my door. Didn't ask me to draw back, I just wanted to. The caretaker before her said, "Let's express the grief, Lily, put it on canvas." I shoved a towel under my door so hard they ripped the frame apart. Maya never asked me to paint my grief. She just painted next to me. That was everything. Noah didn't step forward. Arms crossed, jaw tight. His voice sounded like a machine that hadn't run in a year. Grinding, reluctant, but running. I threw water at the last guy because he asked me to describe the sound my mother's car made when the truck hit it. Said it would help me process. I poured water on his shoes and decided I was done talking to anyone who thought healing meant picturing my mother dying in high definition. He swallowed. The sound carried across the foyer. Maya left guitar tabs outside my door. Blackbird. When I heard music come out of my own hands for the first time since Mom died, it was the first moment in 11 months I didn't want to disappear. Garrett was crying. Not the controlled kind, not the private kind you do behind a closed office door with a bourbon in your hand. The kind that dismantles your face, shoulders convulsing, both hands pressed over his mouth. He slid down the wall until he sat on the hallway floor like a man whose skeleton had quit on him, and he stayed there because there was nowhere lower to go. Emma turned to face her father directly. She held the notebook open, but she wasn't reading anymore. She was speaking from a place deeper than pages. Her voice had changed, not louder, but fuller, like a river that had been dammed for a year finally breaking through the concrete. Mom told us something the night before the accident. We were on the couch, all four of us. She had her arms around Lily and me, and Noah was on the floor with his head against her knee. She was playing with his hair the way she always did, twisting it around her finger while she talked. And she said, "If anything ever happens to me, don't go silent. The world needs your voices. Promise me." Emma paused. The foyer was so quiet you could hear the chandelier crystals shifting in the draft from the open door. We all said, "We promise, Mom." And then she died. And we broke that promise for 11 months. Her voice cracked. She blinked hard, steadied. Maya didn't fix us. She didn't cure us. She just made it safe to keep Mom's promise again. And you're firing her because Diane Prescott edited a security video. The name landed like a grenade on the marble. "Camera 7, Noah said flatly. "I heard Diane pulling footage off the server 3 nights ago. She didn't know I was in the next room." Garrett turned. Diane stood 6 feet behind him, face the color of old newspaper, hands clasped so tight the tendons stood like cables. Full footage. Camera 7. Every frame unedited. On my desk in 10 minutes. "Mr. Winston, I was only trying to protect this family. 10 minutes. Her heels clicked toward the security office. Slower now. Unsteady. The sound of a woman walking across a floor already pulled from under her. Garrett hauled himself off the ground, straightened his shirt, ran a hand across his wet face. He walked to the base of the staircase and looked up at his 3 children. His 3 speaking, breathing, standing, living children in a row on the landing. He stared at them like a man seeing sunlight after a year underground. He turned to Maya. She was still at the door, hand still on the brass latch, suitcase at her feet, box of crayons and clay and a cracked ukulele sitting on top. She hadn't moved during any of it. Not because she was frozen, because she'd learned a long time ago that the most powerful thing you can do in a room full of breaking people is stay still and let them break. He crossed the foyer. Each step echoed. Marble on leather, the sound bouncing off walls that had heard nothing but silence and staff shoes for 11 months. He picked up her suitcase, set it behind him. 2 words. "Stay, please." Maya's chin trembled. She pressed her lips together, nodded once, and didn't trust herself to speak. Then Lily came down the stairs. Slowly at first, then faster. Then Noah, 2 steps at a time. Then Emma, still holding the notebook against her chest. And in the marble foyer of a billionaire's silent estate, 3 19-year-olds who hadn't spoken a word in 11 months wrapped their arms around a woman with a cracked ukulele and a box of colored pencils, and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had been liquid since November. Garrett stood 3 feet away, watching. He didn't join the embrace. Not yet. He didn't feel he'd earned it. But he placed his hand on Noah's shoulder. Gently, carefully, like touching something he was afraid would pull away. Noah didn't pull away. He leaned into it. Just barely, just enough. It was the most his son had given him in a year, and it was more than enough. 6 months later, the silence had changed, from something that suffocated to something that breathed. Lily went back to art school in the spring. Her first exhibition was a series of 12 charcoal portraits, one for each caretaker who had tried and failed. Every piece showed a closed door. Different angle, different light, same barrier. The 13th piece was a watercolor of two women sitting on a hallway floor, one reading, one drawing. No door between them. She called the series Threshold. 3 galleries requested showings before the semester ended. The dean called it the most emotionally honest student work she'd seen in 20 years. Noah recorded his first track in a studio Garrett built in the East Wing. Soundproofed walls, professional mixing board, the kind of setup most musicians dream about. But the first thing Noah brought in was the old acoustic guitar from under his bed. Not the new one Garrett offered to buy. The one with the worn fret marks and the scratch near the sound hole where Emma had dropped it when they were 14. He called the track 2 a.m., a finger-picked acoustic piece with no lyrics, just melody. 3 minutes and 42 seconds of the sound a hallway makes when 3 voices whisper in the dark. He recorded it in one take, didn't fix the imperfections, said they were the point. He uploaded it without telling anyone. 2 million streams in a month. People left comments saying they didn't know why it made them cry. Noah knew why. He never explained. Emma published The Year We Stopped Talking. The thick notebook became a 12,000-word cover feature in a national magazine. Every sentence precise. Every paragraph built by someone who understood exactly what words cost and chose to spend them anyway. The piece, named Diane Prescott, documented everything she'd done, the edited footage, the staff manipulation, the campaign to isolate Maya. Documented it clinically, completely, and without mercy. Diane was terminated the morning after the staircase. Garrett reviewed the full footage. 23 minutes of Maya motionless, never touching the handle. Shaw retracted his memo. I allowed my professional ego to override my clinical judgment. Garrett put $5 million of his personal wealth into the Winston Voice Foundation, a center for speech and language therapy for young adults who had lost someone and lost their words along with them. No rigid protocols, no mandatory timelines, no 5-stage frameworks. Just space, music, art, silence when silence was needed, and therapists trained in the methods that St. Andrew's Hospital had called reckless and a liability. Maya ran it. Director, head therapist, the woman with the crayons. On the center's opening day, Garrett stood at the podium. He wasn't a man built for public vulnerability, and it showed. Hands white-knuckled on the lectern, tie knotted 1 notch too tight, voice controlled the way you control something that might break if you let go. But he said one thing nobody in the room forgot. I fired 12 people for failing to make my children talk. I almost fired the one person who understood that they never stopped. In the front row, the triplets sat together. Lily had her sketchbook open on her knee, pencil moving softly across the page even during the speech. Noah sat with his hands clasped, one thumb tapping a rhythm only he could hear. Emma was perfectly still, watching her father, with the very first yellow crane Maya had given her tucked into the breast pocket of her jacket like a corsage. After the ceremony, Maya walked to her office on the center's 2nd floor. Small room, 1 window, a desk and a bookshelf and not much else. On the wall hung the first drawing Lily had ever slid under her door. The woman in the hallway, reading, 1 foot tucked under the other knee. On the desk, a line of yellow cranes stood in a row. And leaning against the windowsill, catching the late afternoon light, the ukulele with the cracked neck she'd glued back together in another life. Garrett stopped by on his way out. He leaned in the doorway, coffee in hand, and looked at her for a long moment. Claire would have loved you, he said. Maya smiled. She already told me, through them. Garrett nodded slowly. His eyes stayed on the cranes for a long beat. Those little yellow paper birds lined up on a stranger's desk, each one carrying a piece of his dead wife's voice. He didn't know what chamomile tea smelled like when it steeped. Didn't know Claire had used the same drugstore lotion since college. His own wife. 19 years of marriage, and a 26-year-old with a box of crayons had learned more about Claire in 2 weeks of folded paper than he had in a decade of living beside her. He took a breath, left without another word. He didn't need one. And for the first time since November, he didn't want one either. Maya sat down at her desk. Outside the window, the city hummed with the sound of 1,000,000 people going somewhere. Inside the building, on the first floor, a 17-year-old boy who hadn't spoken in 4 months was sitting in a quiet room with a counselor, a set of colored pencils, and all the time in the world. Maya picked up the ukulele, ran her thumb across the strings. That same soft, imperfect chord filled the room. The same chord that had filled a third-floor bedroom next to the washing machines on her very first night in a billionaire's house. And she listened.
12 experts trying to make those kids talk. Maya just sat on a hallway floor and listened. Everybody who walked into the house heard silence. Maya heard a languid, droning slit under doors, a guitar playing at midnight, yellow paper cranes carrying a dead mother's words. Not 1 second of that silence was empty. It was grief speaking the only way it knew how, and that's what breaks me about this story. We keep demanding people heal on our terms, speak when we're ready, open up on our schedule, but the people who actually say first, they don't hand you a script. They sit beside you in the dark and learn whatever language your pain is speaking, even if it's silence, especially if it's silence. So let me leave you with this. When someone you love goes quiet, are you trying to make them talk, or are you learning how to hear what they're already saying? And what if the silence in your own life isn't emptiness, but a voice you haven't learned to translate yet? Tell me in the comments. What would you have done in Garage Souls? Subscribe if this one hit different. I'll see you in the next one.